Danganronpa is a strange franchise, to say the least, but there is obviously something in this franchise that resonates with people, and I wouldn't be making this video if it hadn't resonated with me. I've loved these games for years, and given the current lockdown situation, I thought this would be the perfect time to revisit the series and replay the main 3 games. So here we are. I've decided to dive a little deeper into my favourite cases and explore what I love so much about them. At the moment, I've jotted down 2 cases from each game that I plan on analysing here as a series of videos, but hey, the amount may change. I am, at my core, an indecisive twat, and I honestly don't think there is a single case in this franchise that doesn't have something to enjoy, even if that one thing is a seesaw meme. I'd like to kick off this series with the second case in the first game for 2 reasons. Firstly, I hope to do this series in chronological order, since that's how I'm replaying them. We'll see how that goes. And secondly, this case is the one that made me realise how much the game had grabbed me. After the emotional gut punches in this chapter, I realised that I could just not escape this game. I was now emotionally invested. This is honestly such an interesting case to analyse and explore, so I'm going to do that now. One of the main reasons I love this case so much is the way the whole thing plays out almost like a Shakespearean tragedy. The chapter is called Boy's Life of Despair, so right from the start the overarching theme of masculinity is established. And I especially love how both Chihiro the victim and Mondo the murderer had very similar struggles and parallel storylines, despite their obvious differences. Everything in this chapter feels like it had a purpose, and it all leads towards the same overarching message. It's great, honestly. Let's talk about Chihiro first. My god, do I love this character. When I was playing the game for the first time, I didn't really think much of Chihiro. I just thought, oh, she's cute and shy. Then that developed into me getting almost annoyed by how sensitive he was. It actually wasn't until the second chapter that I began to really like Chihiro. The moments when he expressed his desire to become stronger I thought was really admirable, and the fact that he actually carried through on his plan rather than just moping about and lamenting his weakness I thought was great. A shame it didn't work out, but Honestly, the way Chihiro is able to tackle his inferiority complex in this chapter is really something, especially given how deep he fell into it. In Monokuma's explanation at the end of the trial, he explains how Chihiro presenting as female was a sort of armour for him, to protect himself from the abuse he received from others about how weak he was. In order for him to go as far as to conceal his gender, it makes you wonder how severe the abuse he got was. He was a victim of society's perception of masculinity, and it caused him serious psychological damage. Yet, even in this horrendous situation of the killing game, he finds the motivation within himself to change for the better and accept who he is. Just this shot of him, looking up, all determined, almost brings a tear to my eye. Oh god, why did it all have to go wrong? Like I said, it's all beautifully tragic. On the other side of the manly spectrum, we have Mondo. Mondo being the one Chihiro went to become stronger is hugely significant. Mondo is the physical embodiment of traditional masculinity. He's big, strong, aggressive, respected, swears a lot, not the most intelligent, and has a haircut that makes him look like a goblet shark. The ultimate man! But oh ho ho, Mondo also has struggles with an inferiority complex of his own, and has suffered mentally because of society's perception of masculinity. I feel like this video is just going to keep coming back to fuck society! I think I'm okay with that. Mondo's admiration of his older brother Daya kept growing and growing until it had developed into an inferiority complex. This was only worsened when Daya announced his retirement from the gang and the members questioned Mondo's strength and ability. They viewed him as just a kid who could never live up to his brother's greatness, and Mondo also shared this belief, so, like Chihiro, he vowed that he needed to get stronger. Unfortunately, his blind ambition sort of led to his brother's death, and he thrust himself into a lie. His tough guy facade was pushed to the max, and he tried his best to hide his guilt and weakness. He was desperately clinging to this persona he had created, the strongest, most respected bike gang leader in the country. Someone who could make his brother proud. So, we now have 2 boys on opposite ends of the spectrum, but both lying and hiding their identities. But while Mondo tries to deny his weakness, Chihiro recognises his and makes the decision to change. In the moments when Chihiro comes to see Mondo and not only tells him his deepest secret, but also his plan to become stronger, Mondo is faced with the reality of his failings, of his weakness. Mondo had devoted himself to what he considered to be strength to try and cover up his weakness. But the emotional and mental strength it took Chihiro to make his decision is the kind of strength Mondo needed but could never achieve. And honestly, while killing Chihiro in a jealous rage is an absolutely horrendous thing to do, I can't quite bring myself to hate Mondo's character for doing it, because I understand. They were both victims of the same pressures of society, and were bound to clash. This case was so impactful for me because of how they really explored the characters of both the victim and the killer, and it all made sense in my mind how it turned out this way. Another thing that makes this case feel even more like a Shakespearean tragedy is in Chihiro and Mondo's free time events, and the way you had an impact on the way the whole thing played out. Yes, the free time events are optional and not necessarily a part of the main story, but hey, with a case as character driven as this one, it only made sense to me to learn more about the characters through their free times. I actually finished both Mondo's and Chihiro's free time events in school mode once I had completed the game, but as the conversations reference the main story, I'd like to say that these events occurred at some point in the first 2 chapters of the game. I'ma get straight to the point. Chihiro's final free time event broke me. Chihiro brings you to his room and starts asking if you do any sports. He's shocked to hear that you don't and tells you how strong you are in his eyes. You deny being strong and say you're on the bottom rung of masculinity, and suggests that Chihiro goes to Mondo instead. Yes, you, Makoto, the player, suggest that Chihiro goes to see Mondo to learn about being strong. And well, he does. But at the end of this event, Chihiro opens up to you about having an inferiority complex, and you talk about your doubts and insecurities together. Normally the free time events get more and more personal as they go on, but this one really did feel special, especially considering what goes on to happen. Mondo's are a bit more chill. He talks about his respect for his brother, and in his last one opens up about his attachment to his gang, and how he's sad that it'll eventually have to come to an end. But something that stuck out to me was our conversation about dogs in his second to last event. To me, it seems significant that he waited this long to talk about something that he's so passionate about, but it's obvious that loving dogs and thinking they're cute doesn't really fit in with this tough guy persona. So he wanted to make sure you were trustworthy before even bringing it up. I also love that his dog was a Maltese as well, and the way he says "wiggle that little butt" is just so wholesome. Right, I think I've rambled about these two enough. I need to move on to another part of this case that I absolutely loved. One area that I think Danganronpa really excels in all 3 games is with its antagonists. And I'm not talking about Junko or Smoogie, I'm talking about that one character in every game's main cast that just refuses to cooperate with the group and loves to stir up trouble in trials. And while I would argue that these characters improve as the games go on, Byakuya is still a great character, and what he does in this case is probably his best moment in the whole game. Before this chapter, he had been a massive dick, but it's this chapter that solidifies him as an antagonist. Throughout the story, Byakuya makes it very clear that he views this whole situation as a game, but it's only really in this chapter where he starts taking steps to ensure that he wins it. He refuses to come to the morning gatherings in the dining hall, A, because he doesn't trust us, B, because he feels that cooperation in this type of elimination game is a waste of time, and C, because he wants to read mystery novels, because they might become useful to him at some point. When we find him in the library, he makes his stance on the whole affair very clear. He has every intention to win this game, whatever that entails, and he's certain that he will just not die. As Celeste points out, because he was raised as the heir to the Tagami Empire, he feels that he is superior to everyone else, and that it's just in his destiny to rise above us and win every test he is faced with. This scene is the perfect setup for his actions later in this chapter. And speaking of those actions, let's discuss them. So Byakuya is just walking about in the middle of the night, which again just demonstrates how he honestly feels that death is something that will just never happen to him. When he comes across a strange scene, he sees Mondo fleeing from the girls' changing rooms covered in blood. He immediately investigates further and discovers Chihiro's dead body. He can easily figure out that Mondo killed Chihiro, which puts him in a very comfortable situation. He knows that when the class trial comes around, whatever other people say, he'll be able to tell them who the killer is, and he will be completely safe from execution. So he thinks to himself, since I'm completely safe in this situation, how can I manipulate this in order to benefit myself? So he decides to, tie Chihiro's body to the gym equipment and write a message on the wall with his blood. This fucking man. He does this in order to make it look like the scene of a serial killer's crime, which he already knows is Toko. He decides to pin the whole thing on Toko by planting fake evidence, to not only tell everyone Toko's secret that she has DID, but to test everyone in the group. He wanted to see how people used this new evidence, and who are the ones who would come to the truth. Yes, he disturbed the dead body of a classmate, and blamed it on another classmate for information that could benefit him when he decides to kill someone. All of this is so effective at creating a real sense of dread within the player. Byakuya, who is already one of the most intelligent people in the class, bar Kyoko of course, and has a real disregard for the lives of other people, even going as far as to call a dead body just an object, is now in a position where he is preparing to kill. At the end of the trial, he even makes a point to single us out as someone he needs to watch out for. His behaviour at the start of the game sowed the seeds of him being untrustworthy inside the player, but this chapter is like planting a bomb inside the player. For the rest of the game, you're going to feel this paranoia wherever Byakuya is concerned, and I think that's brilliant. Unfortunately, the bomb doesn't actually go off. It more fizzles out as Byakuya actually starts being helpful to the group as he shifts his perspective away from beating us at the game, but rather beating the mastermind at their own game. This would have to be my only problem with his character. I would have loved his development more if he had actually tried something. Don't get me wrong, I do really like how his character turns from a narcissistic dickhead into a reluctant ally, but his actions in this case are always stuck in my mind, and it all ended up feeling rather anticlimactic. Imagine if at some point after this trial, Byakuya left us some strange clues that led us to a location where he planned to kill us, but Kyoko saw us acting suspiciously and tailed us. Imagine the even further paranoia of having to live and cooperate with someone who actively tried to kill you. But this is all just my opinion. I said before that I thought the antagonists got better as the games went on, and I personally think that's because they died. Their ambiguous intentions all led to something. They both actually took action and went out with a bang. I love Byakuya's character, but I do feel like he fizzled out and could have been more. It wouldn't be a proper Danganronpa video without some mention of the actual trial. And again, the trials are parts of these games that I absolutely love, but feel they got better as the franchise went on. I found the trials in the first game to be much weaker compared to the ones in other games. The only gameplay elements are the non-stop debates, the occasional choice, and a hangman's gambit. And the mysteries tend to be much more straightforward than in the other games, which leaves the trials significantly shorter. Despite all that, this is a really enjoyable trial and one of my favourites in the game. I love the reveal that Toko is DID and felt the build up to it was pretty good. The addition of Genocide Jack/Jill is not only great because of how fun and entertaining her character is despite being a serial killer and adding yet more paranoia upon the cast, but also because of how it seems to explain a lot of Toko's behaviour. I'm going to be honest and say that I really didn't like Toko in this game. Her role in Ultra Despair Girls and her relationship with Kamaru does so much for her character, and made her really grow on me, but in this game she really rubbed me up the wrong way. But the knowledge of Genocide Jill does make her more sympathetic and understandable. It must be absolutely horrific to know that just sometimes you become a deranged serial killer and have no knowledge of what's happened. It explains her standoffish and paranoid attitude, and makes her mean remarks seem almost like she's purposefully pushing people away in case Genocide Jill is set loose. I also love the use of her as a red herring in this case. Byakuya pushing for it so hard at the start really caught me off guard, because I figured it would end up being a twist at the end of the trial. How they brought it up so quickly really surprised me in my first playthrough. I also really love Byakuya's calm and superior attitude when he starts to come under suspicion. He knows that he's in the clear and is just enjoying watching everyone. And I love the contrast between this and how he becomes caught off guard when you start to figure out details that he didn't know. This also occurs in other trials, and it's honestly one of my favourite things, watching him get so annoyed that a commoner like you figured out something he didn't. I must admit, out of all the antagonists, Byakuya is by far the most fun to piss off. One issue I had with the trial at first is how Mondo first comes under suspicion. It was all based on chance, really. If he hadn't misspoke, we'd just be going around in circles waiting for someone to reveal themselves. But I have less of a problem with it now, especially considering that it was a spur-of-the-moment passion kill that he regretted. He was under a lot of pressure and must have been so confused to find the scene how it was. So it makes sense that he would trip up and let that piece of information slip. I also find it acceptable since Kyoko was specifically targeting Mondo because of her suspicions. Quick side, since I feel that this video is turning into me just gushing about male characters, Kyoko is probably my favourite character in this game. She's just great, honestly. I'll probably get into it more in another one of my videos. Something else in this trial that I want to mention is something quite a few Danganronpa cases use, and I love it each time. It's how a tiny piece of evidence, or something that seems completely unrelated or ridiculous, ends up being incredibly important. For example, in the first case in the second game, Mikan falls over and ends up in a compromising position just after the murder happens. At the time, you think, oh damn, it's just some random fan service, but it ends up being the piece of evidence that damns the killer. You know, since he's a perv and would remember the pose if he was actually where he said he was. In this trial, it's the fun and seemingly random scene of Mondo and Taka having an endurance contest in the sauna. It seems only important in regards to their relationship, as they become much closer after this. But since Mondo kept his clothes on in the sauna, he ends up leaving his handbook in his pocket. This explains how he knows the handbook's weakness, and was able to purposefully break Chihiro's by throwing it in the sauna after the murder. Arguably my favourite part of this is that the moment I understood why the sauna scene was relevant, Taka realises it too, and pulls this face. And that broke me. They were bros! Taka's defense of Mondo at the end of the trial is one of the main reasons that this trial ends up being such an emotional gut punch. Although their friendship seemingly comes out of nowhere, it does feel quite genuine. They are both good leaders and come across as being brave and strong. They butt heads at first, but after what happened in the sauna after you leave them, they seemingly came to an understanding. I think that it makes sense that they both ended up being quite vulnerable around each other, which gave them a respect for the other. And while the way they kept saying bro, manly bond, and friendship among men kinda annoyed me at first, I can let it slide because of the extreme focus on masculinity in this chapter. Taka's breakdown once Mondo is revealed to be the killer is so heartbreaking, especially considering that in his free time events, Taka tells you that he's never actually had a real friend before. This poor boy, his first friend, kills someone and then gets killed. What is this? And just for the record, Taka's voice actor kills the scream when he discovers Chihiro's body. Makoto's primal scream just made me laugh in comparison.
What the heck?
I also really like the structure of this whole chapter. Some chapters of Danganronpa can feel incredibly rushed, especially in this first game, and some chapters in the later games can feel very slow, so slow that you find yourself waiting for the death to happen. This chapter's pacing just feels really great. It starts off beautifully when Makoto returns to his room and, clearly traumatised by the first chapter, checks his bathroom. You know, the murder scene. Just the shot of his empty bathroom so beautifully captures his emotions. Then, the rest of the chapter never feels boring. From Byakuya going AWOL, to Mondo and Taka's friendship among men, to the scene where Monokuma gives out the motives. I love how this scene plays out, by the way. How we're all apprehensive and nervous when he's about to give out the motive, our deepest and darkest secrets that he plans to expose if a murder doesn't occur. And how completely underwhelming and ridiculous some of the secrets are, and the group's certainty that a murder won't happen over this. The camaraderie of everyone discouraging Monokuma, and then immediately after, the paranoia shoots right back up again after Taka suggests we all share our secrets anyway, and some people are clearly very against this. The whole chapter has a rhyme and a reason, and it all comes together perfectly in the trial. Okay then, I feel like I've rambled about this case enough for one day. All of this is why I believe that this case is one of Danganronpa's finest, and one of my personal favourites. The depth of the characters involved in this case is great, the overall story arc of the chapter is great, the trial is great. I could probably keep going to be perfectly honest, but this script was already twice the size of my average uni essay. If you, for some reason, enjoyed this, be sure to leave a like or a comment. Like I said at the start, I'll be back with more of these soon because I have 3 more months before I can go back to uni. My idea of fun is writing essays on a game series that I like. On that note, thanks for watching!